The following game was played 6.5 years ago on ICC. The engine was Crafty, 19 point something. I'm not sure exactly which version it was, but it was rated over 3,000 at the time. And this was a 4-minute blitz game. I was black, so let's take a look. E4, E6, D4, D5, knight D2, D takes E4, knight takes E4, knight D7. This is the French defense. Knight F3, knight G to F6, takes, bishop D3, C5, D takes E5, bishop takes E5, queen E2, castles, bishop G5, queen A5 check. Of course, in a very fast blitz game like this, you don't have much time to think, but I believe that this is still all according to known theory. The computer played bishop D2, but I believe that the correct move, or the theoretical move, is C3. And of course, queen F5 is also a good move, because now it's no longer, the knight is not actually pinned anymore, and it's free to move. So for example, if C3 here, then I can just move. But the computer played bishop B2, I played bishop B4, castles, and now just a trade. Bishop D7, knight C4, queen C7. I remember this game, it was very straightforward. I mean, as you've seen so far, C3 was still a possibility for white, but instead the computer allowed all these trades. And okay, white has a pawn majority on the queen side, but on the other hand, black has a pawn majority on the king side. So, and also of course this pawn is pushed and it's on E6. Knight E5, bishop C6, rook F to E1, A6, rook A to D1, centralizing both the rooks. Rook A to D8, C4, A5. I played A5 because, well, white could have played something like B4 and maybe even A4, or well, A3 or something. Yeah. A4 could have been possible after a move like, well, I'm just speculating, queen C2 or whatever. But A5 stops any B4 ideas. And now knight takes E6, queen takes C6. Rook D2, rook D7, both doubling rooks. On the D file, queen E5, B6. I play B6 so that I could trade off queens if necessary. F3, queen C5 check. Now just a trade. King F2, King F8. It's always a good idea to bring the king closer to the center. King E3, H6. H6, of course, because if my knight ever moves, then this pawn could be a target, although it's not a very good idea right now, because, I mean, if the bishop ever moves, then all the rook trades, and then just a move like G6, and the bishop would have to sacrifice itself for another pawn. So, okay, 2 pawns for a piece, and black, of course, is winning that position. So H6, but it's just preventing any ideas. And now just a bunch of rook trades. King E7, A3, King D6, King C3, H4, King C6. White is obviously preparing B4, trying to break through, although as we will see, white does get this pawn on the C file, keeps the pawn on the C file, you know, a passed pawn, but on the other hand, I managed to create a passed pawn myself, as we will soon see. Bishop A4 check, King C7, and now B4, just A takes B4, A takes B4, C takes B4, King takes B4. So far this game has been very straightforward. We've seen a bunch of trades, and now we have of course reached the end game, knight versus bishop. And when the light pieces come off, like here, and now there's pawn endgame, and like I said, white has this pawn as its pass pawn, and now of course I have to create a pass pawn myself. The point is that white does not have any time to stop black from creating a pass pawn himself. Okay, maybe a move like, I mean, normally in positions like this where the opposite king is hoping to escort his pass pawn down the board, then before that maybe a move like h5, it also stops ideas. But on the other hand, I'm not trying to create any pass pawns here on the king's side, but in the center, so I play off to g4, f6, and it becomes quite obvious what I'm trying to do here. My next move will be e5, and now h5, e5, f takes e5, f takes e5, and the king has to move, king b4, and now my king comes to c6, king c4, and here's what could have been a Zugzwang. I mean, somebody has to move. White can't move, because if he does, I will just take the pawn, and if black moves, the same thing. White just takes the pawn, and if the king moves, then it just loses immediately. But of course, now we both have passed pawns, and now it's white to move. Sorry, black to move, so I have to play e4, king d4, and in order to win this pawn, I have to push it one more square to e3, king takes e3, king takes e5, and of course this is drawn, g5. I know, of course I don't take the pawn, I just bring my king closer to the king's side, king d6, g takes h6, g takes h6, king e4, king e6, king f4, king f6, king g4, king e6, and this is, of course this would have been a draw anyway. Even if white would win that pawn, it's still a draw, and of course if black ever wins the h pawn, it's also drawn. But you don't want to let the enemy king anywhere close to, well, I did manage to win the pawn, but it doesn't really matter, because the computer had, of course, everything calculated out. So I just, well, of course it could have taken the pawn right away, but instead king h1, king f4, king takes h2, and it's a draw. So let's take a quick look at the opening one more time. As we can see, it was very straightforward, a bunch of trades, and here just trading off everything, and a a5 stop b4 and so on. Okay, to sum up, like I said a couple of times already, it was a straightforward, easy game. A bunch of trade took place. A little bit unusual for the computer, I suppose, but it depends on what kind of opening you choose, or defense in this case. I chose the French defense. I'm not sure if I was actually playing the French very often at the time, but I mean, the French can be a very solid defense. He did have the bishop potentially aiming at my king side, but you know, as long as you just, especially after all of these trades, there's not so much left to actually attack the king side. And when the computer doubled on the rook d file, I did the same thing. And now, of course, as we already saw, if and when the bishop ever moves, the rook trades immediately take place, as we saw over here. After bishop c2, just everything comes off, and also after h6, there's no pawn on h7 to attack. So this is a pure endgame from pretty much everything. Was very simple. I mean, it was an easy game, really. I mean, even if it was a very strong computer engine, but okay. Well, I hope you enjoyed this game, and perhaps there was something in the end game for someone who's not very familiar with the end games, how to play and stuff. I suppose this was a instructed game. I mean, this was a computer, so computers don't make any mistakes, and neither did I in this game, so I hope it was instructive. Okay, thank you.